Thank you, guys. Hi again. Pleasure to be here as usual. The fact that you are also kindly following us on a Friday afternoon means that you are little heroes. Thank you for bearing with us and thank you for helping me animate the session. As you know, as you've seen, this session is actually for Rotaract members only. So this time will be a bit more intimate, but it also means that as part of the services that Rotaract provides to its member, it will also try to be a bit more individual, a bit more practical. As usual, and this is absolutely up to you, it's your choice, feel free to turn on your camera, yes or no, otherwise you will feel very lonely here in Brussels, but I trust your judgment. As the last time, this webinar and this series of webinar aims at providing some food for thoughts. I'll be very honest with you. It's, writing cover letters and writing CV, it's really not a science, it's more of an art. So please take my suggestion, tips and tricks with a grain of salt. But it really wants to provide some food for thought on how to do things differently, maybe to try to draw some experience for existing practices out there, and maybe to plant a seed of creativity for something new or something better. This lecture is specifically intended for junior or entry levels. If you think some of these comments are a bit too basic, don't hesitate to go back to me or to Lauren or to the Secretariat. We can also provide a tailored, customized feedback on your work with the aim of having you preparing better documentation for your applications. Also, I really want to stress that, of course, I can only drive conclusion from my experience, and this comes mostly from the Brussels-based public affairs consultancy corporate job market. So I'm not an expert in everything, but I really do my best to provide some general support to your applications. As you also know, this is a series of webinars specifically intended on how to write good candidature. In the previous session last week, we talked about CVs, and in this one, we will be talking about cover letters. And the next session will focus on actual interaction with you. Should you be kind enough to share with us some of your cover letter and curriculum so that we can have a look at them together, maybe improve them, and see what else can be done. By now, you might remember who I am, but just for the sake of completeness, my name is Andrea Boccuni. I'm working as Senior Governmental Affairs at BASF, which is a large chemical corporation, a German corporation. But before that, and before joining my company, I've been working in Brussels for 7 years, in the European Parliament as a parliamentary assistant, in the European Commission in DG Sante. But first and foremost, I've been working as a lobbyist for agri-food related topics. Next to that, I'm really passionate about lobbying, so I never lose an opportunity to share some of my thoughts with students, whether they may be MBAs or university students. I also had a chance to work very closely with the NGO sector in my capacity as senior fellow at the Good Lobby, and I'm also like myself, I like to entertain myself in the area of job seeking by providing some mentorship for young professionals and young graduates. Now I think we can kick it off normally, and this is a signature of mine, but this time I will not be open a Mentimeter, so you will not follow me on Mentimeter, but I will still like to kick off, maybe breaking the ice with some questions. So please, if you feel like, feel free to unmute and answer some of these questions. Otherwise, I will be calling on you. So just to make it a bit more interactive and more fun, but don't feel threatened or don't feel the need to answer if you don't feel like. Very well, let's go straight to the point, and let's go straight to the center of what we'll discuss tonight, which is in fact the cover letter. Now, as a mean of really just icebreaker, does any of you would like to share what is the purpose of a cover letter? What do you think a cover letter is for? Open question, stage is yours.
So what I think a cover letter is for is to explain in words a bit why you would be interested in the position, what you would bring, why you would be an asset to the company, and just let the employer know a bit more about yourself in a nice way.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Dylan.
I think cover letter is a way to express yourself because your CV is just like a list of like your bullet points, and a cover letter is like a way to express your thinking, your motivation, and your personality.
Absolutely right. Anyone else? Maybe Sophie? Sophie, would you like to tell us what is a cover letter for you? Maybe not. How about Daphne?
Hello.
Hello, Daphne. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Not too bad. It's Friday, isn't it?
Yes, it's the weekend finally.
When was the last time you wrote a cover letter?
I think 2 or 3 months ago when I was applying for an internship, and I wrote like why I mentioned about myself, my school, and also why I want this position and why I believe I'm a good fit. But of course, I didn't have much idea, so I wanted to attend this webinar to learn from you and improve myself in it. But I got the internship, so maybe maybe it was sufficient. I don't know.
Very well. And just for my curiosity, were you able to receive some feedback from your future employer and today employer on your candidature, or they just liked it the way you proposed them?
After I sent my CV and my cover letter, they wanted to have an interview with me, and afterwards I started.
So that was a spontaneous application?
Yes, maybe I would say. Like I saw the advertisement, not
Okay, no, okay.
advertisements,
So
but
so you responded to an existing application. Very well.
yes.
Someone else would like to share his or her experience with cover letters? Delina, Clara, Hannah, Boya?
Thank you for listening to me.
Of course. Not at all. Dima, when was the last time you sent a cover letter?
Hi. I've sent a cover letter when I was in high school because we had I was in the IB program, so we had specific hours for casts, and then I applied for several internships and positions, and I got in, so I completed them, so I think it was okay.
Was it easy for you to just open up and write a cover letter? How did you manage this exercise?
At first it was difficult because I didn't know what to include or what they wanted from me, but then when I read the description of what I'm gonna do in the internship and stuff, I kind of got an idea of what skills and what things they were looking for. So based on that, I wrote what I have, what I did in the past, and how am I as a person and stuff, my personality, my hobbies, what I like and stuff, and how I'm gonna contribute to that position that I'm gonna apply for. So based on that, they accepted me.
Very well. Well, congratulations, by the way. Very well.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for your feedback, and sorry for picking you up individually. It's just a way for me to break the ice. I think all the elements that we're going to touch upon today were very much outlined from you guys. So indeed, Lauren, this is a great way to send information, and to send information that you wouldn't have space or enough resources to put in a CV or in the text of the letter. But I also specifically like Dylan's answer because I think it's a fantastic opportunity to talk about your motivation. So for some of you that attended the previous session, a CV and a cover letter is just a very fancy way to explain why you want to apply for a specific position. And you will find, and you find yourself already in some situation, that's really the bottom line. This is what an employer wants to know from you, why you're applying for a certain position. And the second point that Dylan made, I also like. So one thing is motivation, very true, but indeed it's also personality. Obviously, your merit is based on your capacity. So if your capacity match what an organization is looking, then you have a chance. But don't forget and never fool yourself, they want a person. So at the end of the day, behind that CV, behind that cover letter, there is someone, there is a person. And so as Dylan said, a cover letter is a great way to show about your personality. What kind of person you are, what is your drive, what is your motivation, and will your drive and motivation fit with the team? This is particularly relevant, especially if some of you might be working for corporations or private entities. You will find that some employers give more a priority to people that fit rather than people that have all the qualification for a job. Obviously, if you're not qualified, you won't be chosen. But if you have candidates with similar CVs, and this is something that you might experience a lot. I'm working very closely with some mentees in my work, and I realized that many of them pass through the selection process, first interview, second interview, third interview, and at the end they don't make it. Not because they're not qualified, they are fully qualified, but at the end of the day, your personality is the final say. When everybody has similar skills, your personality is the discriminant, is what makes you get the position or not. Which then brings, in fact, to what is the context of a cover letter. And in fact, that comes to the question of what kind of message do you want to convey and who is going to receive that message. In general, the type of organization determines the kind of letter you want to write. And that goes back to bureaucratization. How bureaucratic is the organization or the institutions you're applying to? If you're going to work for a bank, then indeed you are expected to write a cover letter in a certain way. You're expected to, the employer is expecting to find certain keywords, is expecting to find a certain tone, a certain message. But on the other side, if perhaps you're applying to a more informal organization, let's say an NGO, maybe Greenpeace, maybe Friends of Earth, maybe, I don't know, a trade association, then actually you might be able to play around and be creative and be a bit more authentic than what is expected of a traditional candidate. We are in Brussels, it's possible, or it could be that some of you might have a career in the European institutions or in political institutions. Institutions are very bureaucratic. They expect cover letter to be written in a very specific way. That's the same when you prepare a Europass format CV for those institutions. So who will receive and which organization will receive your cover letter determines the tone and determines the message. And last but not least, you might find that in some situation, a cover letter is simply mandatory. In other situation, it is not. It's spontaneous, is welcome, but not required. Just to give you a sense of that, when I applied for this very position I have now at BSF, which some would say it's a relatively bureaucratic corporation, I wasn't asked to provide a cover letter, and I didn't produce one. So I didn't even went through the whole ordeal of thinking how to be brilliant in exposing myself to my potential employer. In other situations, for example, when I send spontaneous candidature or spontaneous application, I usually transform my cover letter into my text message. So knowing that not everybody will be reading cover letters, I wrote a shorter version of my cover letter and I put in the body text of my email for my spontaneous application. That makes it faster, and if the person wants more information, I can always provide. So you might figure by now that the context determines the tone and the message. While there are different ways of writing a cover letter, some elements come up more and more. So for example, when you're writing a mandatory cover letter, so when it's requested by the application process you're going through, I think that's a great opportunity to show that you know a bit about the organization. When I ask you what is a cover letter for you, you all rightfully pointed at personal elements. What's my background? What did I study? What I've done yesterday? What I will do tomorrow? Why I want to apply for this position? All right, that's absolutely the right answer. But also, a cover letter is an opportunity to show that you know your area. You don't have to be an expert. But if, for example, you're passionate about business, energy, transport, environment, that's also an opportunity to show that you know about the area. And in particular, you can show that you learned about the organization. Again, you don't have to be an expert in that, but let's imagine that tomorrow you will apply to Tesla. This is just a thought exercise. In your cover letter, next to say that you always like Tesla and Elon Musk and going for electrification of transport system, you can also say, I know that Tesla in Brussels is present in, has 4 plants in Belgium. They want to expand in Europe. There is an opportunity for you new graduates to play in some of these organizations. So it's also an opportunity to show that you actually have done a bit of research on this employer. It also gives you a chance to study the organization's history. To whom you're applying to? Is it an institution like the European Commission that has been there forever, or you're applying to a startup? So maybe you can refer to the fact that you're very impressed by how startups are developing and what's the innovation value they bring to their system. Or maybe you're applying for a good old traditional corporation. Maybe you do energy, you do transport. So you can also show that you can put in the context your application. A good way to get a sense of where an organization is at is to read the latest press release, the latest news of that organization, or maybe, and this is something that I find very interesting, you could search for managers and top executives of that organization on social media to see if they're active, to see what they're about. And this is interesting. I usually do it every time I have a meeting with a politician, because usually they're very active on social media, so I can immediately know through social media what they've been doing yesterday, which kind of conferences they attended the other day, which conferences they will attend in 3 weeks. And this is very true of top managers in organizations. So regardless you would like to apply for a startup, a bank, corporation, or a consultancy, usually top managers in private sector organizations tend to be a bit visible on social media. So that's also a nice opportunity to connect with what you've been doing. The last point, but this is really just the cherry on top, sometimes it helps to know what the competitors of that companies are doing. So for example, when I gave my interview, the interview for the position I have now, I also provide a very short description of how other companies are doing and what does it mean for the organizations I'm now working in. Of course, it's not required from entry level, but for example, as you will progress in your career, you will find that being assertive in your topic and in your topic of choice might be also an interesting point. What about when you send a spontaneous application? What's the difference in tone and message that you can afford for less bureaucratized organization? Well, first of all, you can break the monotony. You know that you're not to request to send a spontaneous application, so you can actually feel detached from the selection process, especially if the cover letter is not required. So that's an opportunity to say something meaningful about yourself and about your motivation. It goes back to the discussion we done last time on the fact that it's important to answer the question, why do you want to work for an organization? But your motivation, it's a bit fuzzy, because of course you're not supposed to know right now where you want to be in 5 years. But it helps, especially if you're on the other side of that cover letter, to demonstrate that you are working towards an objective. It doesn't have to be true, doesn't have to be stable. You can obviously change your mind as you progress in your career. But if you're applying for a, business analyst position, maybe you're applying for one of the big 4, it's interesting from an employer perspective if you can demonstrate that in the future you would like to be a consultant in that area, that's very professional experience will be instrumental for you to achieve your own objectives of growing in a consultant position. Or if you want a future as a banker, working for their organizations will help you grow in the positions you want to become one day. Doesn't have to be true, Doesn't have to be true all throughout your life, but it gives a sense of groundness. It makes me think that you want to work for me because you have an idea, because there's a thought behind. Otherwise, I might just get the feeling that you applied simply because you saw an application and you need a job, which is true, but you can do better. You can do in a more refined way. Another thing that is a bit less orthodox, but I can assure you it's absolutely crucial, ask around. If you really like an organization, but really, it's also worth to do some investigation in parallel. So for example, you could ask employees of that organizations. You could approach them on LinkedIn. You could approach them on Twitter and say, I'm a young graduate in business administration. I would like to see myself in the Boston Consulting Group in 3 years. I know you work there. Can you tell me how is it like? And that gives you important intelligence of what's the actual feel and the work atmosphere that you will find in that organizations. Something that works even better is if you ask former employees. So these are people that are completely detached by the organization, so they feel more comfortable, perhaps, in discussing about the previous employer. So maybe you really, really like Coca-Cola or Unilever. So if you type Coca-Cola on LinkedIn, you will also see all the previous employee of their organizations, and also it might be important or might be interesting to contact them to get a sense of what's actually like to work for them. Last but not least, especially if this is a spontaneous application, you can afford to be direct. You can afford to say that you look for an opportunity. You won't be taken, that wouldn't be taken badly. It just proves that you knew what you want. And actually that reinforces the narrative that you want to work for a certain organization because it's important for you and not just important to find a job in general. Any questions so far? Okay. Then if these are general, let's say these are general elements that you might want to consider when drafting a cover letter, we also can see some things to avoid. The first one, it will be to be too generic. I know sometimes it's difficult to find a good motivation. I know sometimes it's difficult to find something, intelligence to write, but the worst things you could do, it's not the worst things, but you're losing an opportunity to say something more meaningful. Something that you might want to try to avoid is to be too generic. If you're detail-oriented, just write a short paragraph, give me an examples of what makes you detail-oriented. If you're good at multitasking, give me an example of your multitasking skills. Use 2-3 lines to give me an actual, real example, and that will be way better than say that you're good at multitasking. Also, these are some of the wording that you find on Google when you Google how to write a cover letter. So sometimes people would easily recognize that you've been drawing information from those websites. So maybe you can be shorter but more authentic rather than using empty statements where you can actually say something about yourself. Something that I would like also to share is that you may not want to repeat what's already in your CV, which doesn't mean that you shouldn't talk about yourself. But if you use an entire paragraph just to repeat the universities or the studies you have done, that's okay, that's your choice, but maybe that paragraph could have been used in a different way. Maybe that paragraph could have used to provide critical details of the elements you have on the CV, but those details don't fit the CV. So the cover letter becomes an opportunity to expand and to further detail information that don't fit in the CV because too short, not enough space, or it doesn't look nice. I'll bring some concrete examples of that in a few slides. I think another important things to avoid, but this is true of the entire recruitment process, and this is also one of the points I tried to make in the previous session. Why do you want to work with us? If at the end of the cover letter I still don't know how to answer this question, again, these are just suggestions. It's not that you might be doing it wrongly, But sooner or later, this question will come up during the interview process. So why not addressing it immediately? Why not addressing it immediately in the cover letter, perhaps at the very end, before the call to action, before suggesting for an intro meeting or an intro conversation? So why do you want to work for us should be the reasons why you're writing that cover letters in the first place. And last but not least, and that's a relatively common element that also came up in the conversation a moment ago, unless you're not deadly sure about what you're talking about, don't mention the team. Don't say you will be a good addition to the team if you don't know what that team is about. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's really about perceptions, and this is my own personal opinion, so I can talk for other people out there. But if I see a cover letter with a reference to my team, a reference to my work, and a reference to my job, if I know this is not substantiated, I would think it's a bit arrogant. Or worst, I think that you haven't done enough homework to determine what is my team about. Especially today that information are plentiful online, where everybody can check everyone else's on LinkedIn or social media. Don't mention the team unless you have a good reason for it. So if, for example, you had the chance to talk to former employees, if, for example, you have the chance to speak with people working inside, then it's a crucial element. That's actually a point in your favor, because it shows that you like that company so much that you got yourself a way to find that information. Otherwise, it really feels like it's an empty statement, no? Why would you say that because you study business administration, you're a great addition to your team? That's an hypothesis. So unless you can prove it, this is my feeling, don't put it there. Okay, that was a lot of talk. I would like to bring you 3 examples that comes from my actual experience and experience of people that be working with me and in other consultancies to see how do they write. So this is an example from a mandatory cover letter. So this is a cover letter that follows an application where it's absolutely required to write something. Now, this is a great example of how you can use the cover letter to fill in details that don't fit the CV. Specifically, that's a good example because this is an application for a European institution. And so you know that European institutions have a very prescriptive, very stiff model for handling applications. So they want CV to be written in a certain way. And sometimes in those CV it's difficult to highlight some details. In this specific case, I think the paragraph that I like the most is the middle one, because basically it's a very detailed, very granular description of what do you do day to day. So you're not only taking time to specify tasks, so that makes it very specific. You're not just saying, I'm a good project manager. You explain what makes you a good project manager. You explain the operational level, you explain what kind of presentation and communication activities you embark, with which other units and which other colleagues you interact, as well with some data and some practical examples of activities that you can carry out outside the organization, in this case, traveling on working on capacity building, training and activities. Again, I think this is a good example because it really substantiates a rather dry curriculum, and this is a good way to be, in fact, a bit more detailed. So it's very specific and it adds details that you cannot fit in the CV. These other examples I like a lot because this is an example of a cover letter that was prepared, and then after working closely with the person who wrote this cover letter, we drafted another one. So you can see exactly the before and after. Okay, so here on the left, some elements. I think this is a good examples of a bit of a repetition of what you have in your cover, in your CV. So you repeat the academic background, you repeat your last job and your studies, but without any specific elements. And then there are two dense paragraphs of empty statements. I'm a people person. I love to work on project. I'm a generalist. I can easily get excited about new project. This could even be detrimental to the pictures you want to give of yourself. In the previous jobs, I've shown that I'm able to coordinate amongst a variety of stakeholders. Well, if you have shown that, why don't you show me? Could be the employer question. And that I'm good at finding pragmatic solutions. So far, I always met my deadlines. Again, this is interesting because it refers to something you did in the past, but if you feel so strongly about it, why don't you put a reference of that? I have an inclusive approach to work. That means that I keep everyone informed and my eyes and ears wide open for potential opportunities to find individualized solution. Again, this is not wrong. Pay attention. It's not a bad statement. It's still important for the application process. It provides me some information about what kind of what kind of writing style you have. But I can also say it's somehow general. At the end of this process, I'm still not sure what is this person about and why this person relates to my application. So the first part is a bit of repetition of CV, and the second part is vague and unspecific. Now, see the difference with the exact same application from the exact same person, but with a bit of a twist, and tell me if you can see the differences. So how does it feel? Dylan, what do you think? What are the differences?
I think the difference is like it's like a storytelling. So like the first paragraph is like somebody's personal belief, and then the middle paragraph is just like her career, their career stories, and then lastly is their goal. So why they apply to this position.
Precisely. So it's the same person, it's the same application, it's the same process, it's the same background. But as Dylan correctly said, first of all, this is storytelling. So it's not just a bunch of paragraphs that detail information about yourself. No, this is a very structured message. Obviously, you are immediately captured by the first statement. You immediately feel that this person wants to tell you something rather than I'm interested in this position because blah blah blah. So in this situation, we start with a very powerful introduction that goes straight in a very detailed paragraph of some of the skills this person would like to show. And I like this description because it's full of numbers. These are actual numbers. They can be, claimed. They can be, omitted. Of course, numbers are just numbers. But it really gives me the impression that this person knows what she's talking about. Then you see two paragraphs of storytelling. So it's exactly the same as if you would say, I started studying in this university to do it. So it's still your CV, but here there is a very personal touch. So this person really wants to give me a sense of a story. What was the drive that brought this person to study European public spheres? And then indeed, this is a beautiful paragraph, this one. My long-term goal is to become an executive in a media company producing quality journalism. Who knows what's the long-term goal of this person and how things can change. But for the purpose of this exercise and for the purpose of this document, it feels good to know that this person has a direction, regardless the fact that may or may not be true. To achieve this goal, I need to get to know a customer, and working for you, that's the part I blanked, would allow me to be in contact with the customer. So you see, you create a sense of urgency. I must work with you because it's important for my future, with some resonating statement and facts. I think this is a good example. So in fact, a strong start tells about your personality. And the second point, long-term vision, so your motivation. And these are exactly the two aspects that Dylan came up with at the beginning by saying that this is a way to express yourself, motivation and personality. Okay. I think that's pretty much it. I would say that a cover letter takes a bit less than a CV. So I'd like to leave you with some takeaway messages. And these are, again, very similar to the ones you saw last week, but nonetheless important. So the first point is try to receive as many feedbacks as possible. Even though at the end of the day, you get the job, don't lose the opportunity to still ask your employer, how can you improve your style? How can you improve your format? How can you make it better? Especially people that know you and especially people that work with you are the first one that once you see you growing. So they may be the first one that can help you have a better outlook. Also, in this specific situation, we haven't talked a lot about social media, but obviously it goes without saying, in 2021, your CV and cover letter are just as much as an extension of your digital persona as your social media platforms are. So employers will look for you online and they will find you, regardless if on Facebook, Instagrams, or I don't know, TikTok. And the hard copy of your cover letter and CV are basically the just same thing with your profile. So, and this is actually, it works both ways. If you have a very strong statement or if you have a very motivational statement in your CV or in your cover letter, it is a good practice to share that exactly also on LinkedIn. And last but not least, and that goes back to the comment made last week on the fact that if you're a young graduate or if you're a trainee, you might not have a lot to say, but this is absolutely okay because there are many applications out there, but experienced employers, they know how to go through CV. They know how to spot a candidate. They've seen CV, they've seen cover letters. That's why I said it's important to avoid generic formulas because generic formulas abound. So you can afford to be authentic there. And this authenticity is usually picked up even if you don't perform at best or even if you think you have nothing to say. Very well. Before moving to the Q&A, I would like to invite you to the next session. And the next session could be an opportunity just to play with ideas. In the next session, we want to have a peer review cover letters and CV moment. So if you would like to work on your CV or cover letter, feel free to send it to the secretariat or to Lauren. And of course, everything will be treated with the maximum confidentiality. We will not share information of you that you don't want to see out there. And also, it doesn't have to be a real application. So if you want to prepare for the future, maybe let's imagine you want to go work for Tesla. Let's send us an application as if you would be sending an application to Tesla. Let's see what's your writing style, and that's opportunity to play around and to do something nice together.